When it comes to self-development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to transform your life and claim the potential inside of you, then you're in the right place. Welcome to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schechter. I'm a transformation and integration coach, breathwork facilitator, and just a fan of personal growth. You have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world, and there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn simple methods you can use to transform your life and share the stories of practitioners who are doing the work so that you feel inspired to go and practice, because that's the vital point. And this is a real special episode for me. My guest today on the show is David Nichtern, founder of Dharma Moon. David is a senior Buddhist teacher who's been practicing and teaching meditation for over 40 years. He was one of the initial American students of renowned meditation master Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche. He's also won multiple Emmys and been nominated for multiple Grammys, so I think that's the first time I can say that about a guest on the podcast. He has a couple of really great books, Awakening From The Daydream and Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck, which is also the name of his podcast. And he's been featured on all kinds of things. Not the least is one of my favorite shows and how I found him initially, The Midnight Gospel with Duncan Trussell. And after I watched the episode that he was in, I went and listened, I think, to the first podcast that he did with Duncan, because they've done a bunch of them. And he went over mindfulness meditation. And I just really loved the simplicity and precision of the way that David explains mindfulness practice. And to be honest, I immediately integrated it into the way that I would explain mindfulness. The thing is, I have more than a few years of practice under my belt, but my practice has always been sort of this melting pot of different teachers and teachings, things that I've picked up, things that I've read, teachings that I've been to. And that was always okay with me because I understood it. And I felt like I knew enough to teach an intro class, which, really was the only time that I would ever be teaching mindfulness in the past, was maybe a one-off class, and usually to beginners, people that had never meditated before. And then at the beginning of this year of 2023, I found myself in this amazing situation with multiple mindfulness classes that I was teaching. There was a yoga studio. They said, "Hey, do you want to teach a meditation and breathwork class?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's a really broad canvas, that I could paint on." And also working at residential behavioral health and substance abuse facility, and teaching some mindfulness classes there. All of a sudden, I was in this position where we were getting a little bit deeper than the intro class. And I was just kind of trying to figure out how to put all that stuff together. And it didn't feel like what I was communicating was very precise. And I had been listening to more podcasts with David and just really enjoying the way that he teaches. He has a really, I love the metaphors that he uses and the examples that he gives. And he has this really down to earth, relatable quality to the way that he teaches and the way that he speaks. And I decided to check out this amazing mindfulness meditation teacher program that he offers through Dharma Moon, his organization. And it's 100 hours. It's over 5 weekends. It goes into what mindfulness is, as an introduction, which is also a standalone module that you can take, and then how to continue teaching to new people, how to continue teaching students. So returning students, how to teach one-on-one, which were all things that I needed, that I was looking for. And the last module that I just took, which was one of my favorites, is how to give a Dharma talk. As of recording this video here with you, I have one more weekend left coming up, which is ethics and how to start a business. And then I will be officially certified as a mindfulness meditation teacher with Dharma Moon and Tibet House. I've really thoroughly enjoyed the program. I know it's made me a better teacher, certainly more precise, which is cool because I have regular students that are getting the benefit now that I'm working with. It's a really, really amazing program. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and can highly recommend it. So a couple of things. David mentions it during the episode, and it's on the show page, that there's a new cohort for the training starting on June 23rd. And there's a free talk that he's giving about mindfulness and the program with Dr. Robert Thurman on June 6th. And even if you are listening or watching this after those dates, I would definitely recommend going to the Dharma Moon website. So they always have new cohorts starting. And Dharma Moon's really cool. They do a lot of like free Dharma talks, really interesting sort of podcast-esque conversations. For instance, like last week, I listened to a really neat conversation with David and Duncan Trussell about AI and mindfulness and sort of the future of Buddhism and where this is all heading, which was really fascinating. So they're always doing really cool talks. So I definitely would recommend going to the website and checking it out. Also, at the end of the podcast, I included a brief mindfulness practice using the method that I've learned through Dharma Moon that you can save and use for yourself and practice. That's the vital point, right? Is that we want to practice. And as far as this episode goes, this is a real juicy one. We dived right into some really cool topics. We talked about waking up into the now. We talked about this idea that, we talked about this saying that David brought up a few times during the training of suddenly free from fixed mind. We talked about what mindfulness is and isn't. David really indulged me in the vital point of actually practicing and threw in a few vital points of his own, shared some of the pith instructions from his teacher, Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and got into those three principles, the gentleness, precision, and letting go of mindfulness that I mentioned previously. We also talked a little bit about my own teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, and just his inconceivable qualities and, just the realizations and wanting to emulate that. The differences between having the teacher as an example and also realizing that you can cultivate those qualities in yourself as well. And then towards the end, we dropped into this really interesting sort of Venn diagram, Buddhism and psychedelics and where they kind of overlap, which was kind of cool to chat with him about. So without further ado, my friends, here is the Vital Point podcast with David Nichtern. Enjoy. Okay, David Nichtern, welcome to the Vital Point. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That's what I like to get to, actually. So it's the vital point.
The vital point.
Yeah.
Striking through.
It might be a very short podcast.
That's right. Well, I feel like you brought in an aspect of the vital point in the training program with this wonderful saying that I really have been chewing on, suddenly free from fixed mind.
Yeah, we uncorked that wonderful top shelf bottle the last weekend that we were together, and that comes from particular set of teachings that are very much expressed in terms of contemporary. They're not they're from English and not translated from any other language. So yeah, suddenly free from fixed mind is, everybody's trying to get at something. That's what I'm feeling about the the scene these days. You know, the kind of rapidly expanding niche of spiritual kind of exploration, um, and you know, it all revolves around the notion of nowness, right? Yeah. So everybody's trying to come to terms with some vital instruction. You know, like if you left a time capsule, you know, for the year 2023, and we all lived out our lives, and somebody found it 1,000 years from now, what were those people looking for? What were they trying to find? Excuse me. And there seems to be a crescendo of interest in, let's say, incorporating spiritual or psychological aspects into with an inner, you know, knowingness. How would you incorporate some kind of real profound insight into the ongoing slog of everyday living that most of us just kind of slog our way through? Like you put your boots on and you go out and slog your way through the day. So what would that one instruction be? And you know, as you look at what people are saying, there's a couple of key ones, but one is to um, engage the moment, the present, as having some kind of vibrancy and vividness that gets lost really easily. Um, but be here now, the power of now. So the word now is a big deal, you know.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What does it mean to you now? What would you mean by now if you said now?
Now I
Oh,
would
too
say,
late, too late,
yeah.
too
Oh,
late.
yeah. The only moment, the only thing that is really here.
Okay, so we can just jump into a very juicy conversation here. You saw by the time you said that it was already gone,
It's
right?
already gone. Right. Yeah.
And did you also see that the only moment is just a conceptual way of describing something? It's not really the thing itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so this is called, if you don't mind me jumping the tracks a little bit, called the fourth moment. Have you ever heard of the fourth moment?
I haven't.
So, what would the three moments be, do you think?
Well, I would say past and future, maybe.
Yeah, third one.
And the third one, well, I guess we're trying to get at the present, but the present's always changing.
Okay, so even the concept of the idea of the present really doesn't exist from a kind of absolute point of view, even though it's
Yeah.
become a kind of, people are wrapping their minds around thinking that is like a superior moment in some way. It actually is as non existent as the past and the future. So the present
Mm-hmm.
doesn't exist either. So the fourth
Mm-hmm.
moment is the moment that's free of those three designations.
Mm.
That's why it's called the fourth moment.
Interesting. Yeah, and we're all trying to
You
get there in our
weren't
own.
ready for this, right?
No,
There's
but
nowhere to get. The point
this
is,
is exactly why
there's
I
nowhere to
wanted to have
get.
you on.
There's nowhere to get. That's in a nutshell. We're all trying to get to the present as if it
Mm.
was other than the past or the future and something special. But even the present, from that point of view, as a target, as an entity, as a kind of quality of experience, it doesn't really have any more substantial existence than the past or the future.
Mm. That was definitely one of my favorite points of the training program that I've been taking part in
Mm-hmm.
with you is
Mm-hmm.
that it really addresses uh, this sort of misconception with mindfulness that we're supposed to be getting somewhere, that we're supposed to be
Mm.
trying to clear the mind, or that this is bad and this is more desirable, this is what I actually want to be existing in. And a lot of the clients that I'm working with right now are exactly with that. I'm working
Mm.
right now in a inpatient behavioral health center, and
Wow.
teaching people mindfulness usually for the first time. And so a lot of them come into the group with this notion of, well, I can't do this, or they've
Mm-hmm.
tried it before and they're like, well, I have all these thoughts. I sit down and try to meditate, and all of a sudden there's too many thoughts, I can't do it. And I'm like, look, can I tell you a secret? Me too. Where
mm.
we're all in that situation, and we're not trying to get anywhere. We're just connecting as well as we can to the present moment.
Well, so I mean, just tracking this together. Let's just go on a little expedition together.
Love
Tracking
it.
this together, there's a sense of bewilderment that
Yeah.
is underlying a lot of this. I think bewildered is probably closest word in English. It's a fundamental sense of not well. Let's get a little more like doctrinal. Probably the word would be avidya in Sanskrit, and vidya is like clarity and kind of the sharpness of the clear mind, uh, knowingness or what have you, and which has no reference point. It's just self-existing kind of wisdom, and some people would say luminosity, clarity, all those kind of things. And avidya, in Sanskrit, you put a before it, negates it, is the absence of that, and that is the cause of suffering. So this is a kind of a little bit more of a nuanced version than other than saying grasping is the source of suffering or attachment. That's it's really avidya that in grasping and in attachment and in aggression, by the way, and in our general stupor, we have strayed away from just some kind of a clear, present, fully embodied, already present knowingness, which in Tibetan it's ma rigpa. So the word is rigpa, and ma is a negation, and rigpa is like the unfabricated quality of knowing and being aware, unfabricated awareness. There's no cause and condition for it whatsoever. It's primordial, sometimes people would say, or unconditional. And then losing track of that is what causes the drift into the feeling of bewilderment. We lost our ground. We lost mama. We lost our mommy at the mall. We're wandering on the mall without mommy, and we're going, "Mama, where are you?" So sometimes they call this the mother and child reunion.
Yeah, that's such a rich visual, because I can really feel that feeling of being lost, and
yeah,
how sort of helpless you feel when you're separated from that mama.
Yeah.
That,
And we woke up that way, didn't we? Wake up. We don't remember that. We just remember waking up in the mall, wandering around. That's the real meaning of samsara. It feels like that's the without beginning. It just feels like, yeah, I woke up at the circus and the clowns were dancing around, and but actually there were a series of incidents that happened very, very quickly prior to feeling that way. And the ground feeling is you don't actually feel that way. You actually feel like kind of awake. But very quickly that gets glossed over. So we're always recovering that ground, right? Our meditation practice, we're just trying to get back to that ground of like returning home to a certain feeling that actually you recognize.
Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things to me about, the Dharma practice. Going back to that suddenly free from fixed mind is, yes, it's right there. It's in the moment. And there's also a gradual path that most of us are trying to follow so that we can integrate that instantaneous moment for as many moments as we can in a row, or, consecutively, or over time, right?
Over time. So you're tapping on a really important, essential point, which is that we have the sudden recognition of this kind of awakened state. I mean, I hate to use that word because it's been so butchered lately, but let's just go with the original sense of a kind of wakeful state, and the gradual cultivation of the cause and conditions that will allow it to occur more frequently. That's what you just said, and that's our path, as I learned, and as I'm trying to just simply pass it forward, is a merger and acquisition of the sudden and the gradual path. They're both involved. So if it's a sudden path, you have the Zen master yelling at you, "Wake up!" And like, "Oh, okay, I just, and just sit," and you don't even remember what you're supposed to do or anything like that. And then the gradual path is we're just attenuating and becoming a little bit more kind, a little more gentle every day, and working with our little patterns of behavior and stuff. But when you put those together, it's like the dynamite and the string and the match all
Yeah.
come together.
Yeah, I really resonated with the way that you kind of explained this during the mindfulness meditation teacher training, in that the passing down of the recipe, and how
Yeah,
you could give me the recipe, but it's not going to make me any less hungry to hold the recipe in my hand and read it. And I've been using that a lot in my groups, especially because you had this quality of it where it's like, I'm going to give you the recipe, but I don't want to talk about it too much before you actually cook it up. You
yeah,
got to cook it up. That's the real essence. And that's the essence of
yeah,
this show, right? Is the vital point is you have to practice it. You can't
yeah.
look at the recipe and expect something to change.
Well, that's a good vital point. You have to practice is a really good vital point.
Yeah.
Um, and it is like a cooking show. I don't know. I'm very food oriented, so I like the image of a cooking show because they have one already cooked. Buddhism is a cooking show. They already have one that's already cooked. It's called the Buddha, and there's statues all over the place. And Buddhas. There are actually Buddhas. I feel like I've met actual Buddhas in my lifetime. So you go, okay, that's cooked, or that's what it looks like when it's cooked. And then you go through the instructions with the teacher, and you make your own. And then it doesn't rise enough because you didn't put enough yeast in, or whatever it is. But then at the end of the show, you take yours out of the oven. It should look like it should look like the one that was cooked already. And I
Yeah.
think that's my understanding of Buddhism. And we should not revere and worship these teachers. They're the demonstration of the efficacy of the practice. That's all, and the vision of it. So respect is the right thing, and even devotion or sense of loyalty could come into play depending on kind of training that you're doing. But reverence in a theistic way is forbidden in the way I was trained. It is not allowed. Theism is not allowed. You can't reify the teacher and say, I'm just a poor, humble shit that nothing is ever going to go right with, but I am associated with a good team. I have the Buddha on my side. I have the great teachers on my side. You have to manifest it. So that's like, and any teacher worth their salt wouldn't want students like that, actually. That's just a sign of their own weakness and insecurity if they like students like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because there is so much in the Vajrayana teachings about guru devotion and guru yoga, and
Yeah,
meditating with the guru on the crown of your head, and really trying
yeah,
to emulate and be as much of the guru's good qualities as you can. And yet, just like you're saying, I guess the way that I've interpreted it over the years is the teacher is like a mirror. It's like looking in a
yeah.
mirror, and at some point through the practice, you realize that you're looking at yourself in the mirror.
Well, yes, and it's a little uncomfortable. It should be a little uncomfortable. It should be also a little inspiring. But you mentioned guru yoga. For those people who don't know about that, there's in the preparatory practices for Vajrayana, there's a practice called guru yoga, which theistic people could say, "Oh, you're just worshiping the guru," and that's not actually the case. You're identifying with the qualities of the guru through
Right.
visual imagery and kind of a sense of tuning your mind to that. But here's an interesting thing: is the guru is on top of your head, but they're facing the same direction you are. Did you ever think of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not looking back at you. They're looking. It's like imagine guru's on your head, and you're sort of seeing their vantage point. And they're seeing your vantage point, and they're merging. At the end of the practice, you don't go, okay, well, I'm not worthy. I can't do it. You merge. You
Yeah.
dissolve into that. So it's really just enabling and enlivening your own inherent guru-ness. It's not well understood in the West, if you want my humble. And I don't think I'm
It's
going to
not.
go really. I'll get killed for this. I don't think it's that well understood in a lot of the areas in the Asian traditions anymore.
Mm.
They become very institutionalized. They're very heart people. They're very loyal. There's a lot of what I would call theism still in those traditions.
Yeah, I think theism in the way that I've understood it too. Like everything that I've learned about Tibetan Buddhism and Vajrayana is sort of filtered through this theistic upbringing, and sort of trying to unjumble that sometimes and like see it for what it really is, rather than that filter of my own experience. And sometimes it gets a
It's,
little tricky.
were you raised with a
Jewish.
theistic?
Yeah,
But were you
Jewish.
active? I mean, I was kind of very
Yeah.
cynically raised Jewish, but you were bar mitzvah and all that kind of stuff. And,
Oh yeah. I mean, it was active until I had a choice, and then it was inactive.
well, they gave me the choice at 11, and I chose not to be bar mitzvah because I said I'm not really buying into this what I understand about this. And then at 19, I got into Buddhism, and I just thought, okay, this is really, who knows if you found the right rabbi,
Right.
or the right priest,
Yeah.
who knows what you take away from it. But and I think it's fair for us to admit that the Buddhism also can become theistic and it can become nihilistic,
Yeah.
and that's another danger, is that you begin to think you're designing the world. It's all it's all made up anyhow. So who cares what you do? It doesn't really matter. That's also probably not a helpful perspective to hold. That's not a vital point
Yeah.
either.
I think in my experience, there's a certain flavor, and I'm going to put myself first and foremost, in people that convert from the religion that they were brought up with to a new set of beliefs. They tend
Yeah.
to there can tend to be a little bit of let's call it like unhealthy enthusiasm about it. Sometimes
Mm,
like you really throw yourself into
mm,
the trappings and the not the
sure.
vital point, like the I'm gonna
Right.
I'm gonna wear beads, and I'm gonna maybe have a scarf, or put
Yeah.
tonkas up in my house, and I'm not following any sort of dharma, but I
Yeah.
look like a Buddhist, or I look like I'm Jewish.
Sure.
And in 2005, I was fortunate enough to go live in Tibet for a year. And
Oh wow.
I
Okay.
when I went there, I had
Wow.
that idealism of,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. Yeah.
every monk that I meet is going to be like a lama, and going to be so
Mm,
devoted to the teachings, and like, and then I met monks
mm-hmm.
that were like, "Hey, do you want to go buy a new phone with me?" Like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you have a Game Boy? Like that, can I play it?"
Mm-hmm.
Like they were
Mm-hmm.
just regular people wearing
Mm.
robes. Just like there were regular people in my Jewish temple, that weren't really devoted to Judaism. It was just the tradition that they grew up with.
Yeah.
And then there was
Uh,
like, and then there were people in the Dharma centers that I were going to that were like, every Tibetan tradition, you have to follow that, even though we're American and we don't understand the cultural context of why you shouldn't point your feet, in the direction of the shrine, or the
yeah.
teacher, and don't talk to the lama because they need to be on a pedestal. Think weird things
Mm.
like that, where it's like, well, actually, I've had really amazing conversations with llamas. They're pretty
Right.
interesting folks to chat with. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Well, you're going beyond the foyer of
yeah.
the apartment.
Uh huh.
There's a lot of traffic in the foyer. In the vestibule, that before you actually enter the house. And there's
Right.
all kinds of like parties going on there. So once you get past that, you do move beyond the fascination, but you also move into the potency of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's fair to say. You've had a culture on the upside that for 1,200 years in Tibet has cooked up a certain deep uh, perspective based on highly experiential, self-examining, and group gathering information expedition that really you might not be able to find that level of continuity anywhere else in a
Mm.
spiritual tradition. Now that I'm thinking about it, wow, it's an
Hmm.
interesting thought. It's sort of a 1,200 year, uh, you know, from 800 AD, Padmasambhava. You go back to Atisha and Padmasambhava, and it's like there's some kind of continuity from then to now.
Right.
And I guess maybe you could say that about Christianity. Maybe you could say about Judaism.
Well, there's something interesting to me, and we were talking about it earlier about, how the teachings sort of get assimilated into different cultures and where it's at now in, the modern
Yeah,
world.
yeah,
But to kind of go back to your recipe, example, the Dharma has had different little seasonings put into it in these different cultures that it's gone to.
yeah,
Vietnamese Zen has a certain, couple of different spices, and Japanese and, Tibetan definitely has a real strong flavoring to it. Um,
yeah.
and it's just interesting to see how that gets passed down and filtered to the different
A new culture.
cultures. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the import. I mean, somebody gave me a bonsai tree for my birthday about 15 years ago, and it just died within about 3 weeks. I didn't know what to do with it. So, if you gave me a wandering Jew, I would know how to take care of it. That's the name of a plant. Did you know that?
Right, yeah, I do.
Yeah, I don't mean to offend anybody. Just want to be
No.
clear about that. I'm not talking about a person. You know, um, so yeah, there's something about well, and in Japan, I went to a garden tea room with some friends, and they had 500-year-old bonsai trees. That this whole tabletop full of bonsais that were like treasures. And some of them were hundreds and hundreds of years old. Now, the thing that you don't see when you see that, because the tree's not the thing, it's the fact that generations of people have taken care of it properly so that it was actually able to be presented in that form of kind of antiquity, but also thriving in the moment. And,
Mm,
that's going to be, if you start thinking a little more like that, about your practice, in your life, that it's part of a chain. For one thing, you might develop a improved sense of circulation and happiness because you don't put so much weight on this individualized and probably fleeting kind of experience. You start thinking about other people, and people in the future. And
yeah.
I'm old enough to know the people in the. I'm not dead yet, but people in the future are 50 years younger than me. Like you're probably 40 years younger than me. So
Mm.
I think of you as a man from the future, from my point of view. You'll be living with the robots and the deserts, the deserts and the robots. But you know, it's a little bit of a wandering mind. But I just spoke with somebody who's talking about a project where they're going to put 1 billion oysters in the canals here going into the main rivers in New York City and purify the water. We have a lot of access to, if people clarified their intention and their sense of history and
Mm,
cooperation. I'm very far from a kind of like apocalyptic view myself. I think things
yeah.
will just keep evolving, and certain things will rise and certain things will fall. But I put a big personally. You can tell that I put a big hope on the younger people coming up and going like, well, you'll figure this out. This is your time and your dance, and you'll figure it out. Um, and I think back to like, was it any worse when I was born right after World War II? We were getting under our desks in elementary school because if a case of a nuclear warhead was lobbed into Manhattan, then my little desk with the ink pot in it is going to like save
Yeah.
my ass. And I just got up at the age of 10 or said, "This is bullshit. I'm not doing it." Got sent home. I mean, it's like people got to figure it out. And I think when you talk about vital points, you said suddenly free from fixed mind. I'll put another one onto the table. Don't panic.
Mm,
That's something I got directly from my teacher. And it was
yeah.
part of an pith instruction that was more complex. It had two parts. Don't panic when things are going poorly. And guess what the other part was? Don't relax when things are going well. Don't panic when things are going badly, and don't relax when they're going well. There's
Mm,
equilibrium, equanimity, uh, and any good athlete understands this completely.
right.
I mean, that's why I use sports metaphors a lot. I'm thinking of, I watched this comedy the other night with Amy Schumer, Trainwrecked. Have you seen that movie?
Oh yeah, uh-huh.
Oh
And
God, she's
LeBron's in that.
brilliant, man.
Yeah.
And there's LeBron James playing a kind of sitcom role, and I just went, this guy, and he's also on the Calm app, I believe.
Oh
I
yeah,
think he
he
might be on
is.
the. I'm not
Uh-huh.
100. Is he?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I go, respect to that guy, man. He had so much composure, being an actor, and you just could see in his game he has never relaxed because he's like one of the greatest in the world. But you can see him also recalibrating when things are not subsiding. Anybody could take that message. Don't panic when things are going badly, and don't relax when they're going well.
Yeah.
And meaning not to be kind of compressed to the level you don't have any feelings, but maybe not going all the way down the rabbit hole and all the way up Mount Everest when you just you heard that somebody recorded a song of yours on a record or something like that. Well, that's great, you should feel good.
Yeah.
But then that's a good time to start working on other songs
Uh-huh.
and other records. So um, I think don't that's a good pith instruction, a good vital point instruction. Do you like that one?
I love it. Yeah, and it goes with the, one of the three things that we kind of touched on in the program of letting go, gentleness, precision, and letting go.
Right. Right.
The letting go part. And it's something that I think is important to cultivate. Like you're sitting there and you're doing your practice, and the worst thought in the world comes up. Notice it,
Yes.
say thinking, and come back to the breath. Best thought in the world comes up. Notice
Yeah.
it, say
Right.
thinking, and come back.
Yeah.
And I love the humor that you brought into that. I remember one of the first sessions, somebody asked, well, you're a musician, and there were a lot of musicians in the training program.
Right.
And they said, well, what if I could just keep thinking about a song while I'm meditating? Is that okay? And you said, only if it's a hit.
Yeah, you don't have to label it if it's a hit. Uh,
That was great.
on that note, I think if we don't get too lazy and let these machines do all the work for us, which is a definite potential problem where you get lazy intellectually and you just process stuff artificially. I think the mind that we have has much more capacity and dimensionality to it than we ordinarily access. I mean, a lot of people would
Mm.
back that up in neuroscience. But
Mhm.
I remember riding home from LA to New York on an airplane, and you flip through documentaries and things, and there was a documentary on a child prodigy composer. Now, there are a lot of child prodigy players. Somebody sits down and they're like, you can see it on Instagram. You see a 3 year
Right.
old playing boogie woogie piano, and you go like, this is impossible. But the composer thing is much rarer. That a 3 year old will sit down and write a symphony. And this kid, at 3, luckily his mom was a piano teacher, and he's just scribbling little notes on a napkin. Nobody would have known what it was even if she didn't. So, oh, maybe he's got musical aptitude, and they get him trained up, and it gets he can write in his mind an entire symphony at the age of 6, full form, all the
Right.
parts. Then it went a little further. It said he could do 4 of them at once.
Wow.
He could hear 4 separate pieces of music in his head, all like as if you were sitting in a hall that had leakage from 3 other halls, and you could sort of, you're hearing the individual expression of those compositions. Now, I saw that and I went like, you know, holy mackerel. I wouldn't have even conceived of that possibility. So, your assignment, Jonathan, should you decide to accept it, Mission Impossible, is to think of something inconceivable later today.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody
You-
out there in podcast land, later today, just have a cup of tea or something. Think of something that would have been inconceivable to you to imagine, but really, really imagine it properly. Um, It could be, a new form of energy. It could be uh, a new art form. Just go outside of your sense of what's conceivable and pull something out of the void and bring it back. And you, Jonathan, you're going to email it to me, okay?
All right. Yeah. Get some
You're going to blow your
royalties on
mind
it.
first, and then I'll go like, oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah. I'm even just, I guess where my mind goes is those moments of illumination that seemed inconceivable before I experienced them. And
Right. Sure. And you've had those already, so you have evidence in the
yeah,
can already of that.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Isn't
then
that
here's
interesting?
second assignment. You want another assignment too?
Sure, let's go for it.
Okay. Think of something that seems impossible to accomplish, at whatever scale you want to do it, and just figure out how you would do it.
Yeah. Now that's juicy, and that's definitely up my alley.
Well, and it's up all our alleys, and it's kind of like,
Yeah.
in a way, it's the assignment, it's the group assignment right now, because there's things I read in the paper the other day. Sixth extinction event, they say, is happening now. You know what that one is?
Not exactly. I mean, I know what an extinction event is, but no, not the detail of what you're going to
Well,
share.
for example, comet, asteroid hitting the Earth is an
Right.
extinction event.
Uh-huh.
Climate change could be one.
Right.
Um, a global pandemic could be one.
Pandemic.
This one
Right.
is we're just losing the species.
Yeah.
50% of the species on planet Earth are going to be gone
Yeah. It is
in a
quite
short
peculiar.
window of time. Yeah.
Mm.
So, we've got a lot of big information coming in. Uh, Yet, I think most of our everyday lives is pretty straightforward. I'm watching barges go down the East River here out of my window. They're bringing, stuff from Manhattan to Queens. Probably on those boats is some kind of pasta that's going to go to a store in Queens and somebody is going to walk in there with money that works, a credit card that works, buy the pasta, go home and cook it, in a pan that is good, with gas coming into their apartment and a match that lights the gas and plates to put the food on and a couple of kids coming home from school. It's still pretty normal that way, isn't it?
Uh-huh. And yet that
We're
could
not in
change at
some
any
kind of
moment.
freak moment yet, right?
Yeah. But it could
Most of
change
us
at any moment, right?
could change at any moment. That's why I like that show, The Last of Us. Did you see that?
I did. Yeah. It was interesting.
Yeah, it changed, and then all of a sudden you're not in that world anymore.
Right. And that's sort of the bewilderment that we're all walking around in, is that what's here now is permanent and not going to change. And maybe the pandemic kind of gave us a little bit of a wake up call that that's not really true.
I don't think that's the bewilderment that I
Mm.
was trying to
Oh, I
clue
didn't
in.
think it was the bewilderment you were trying to
The,
say.
yeah, the
A
basic,
bewilderment.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the anxiety that we share.
Yeah.
Is that it's going to shift in an uncomfortable way fast, and we won't be ready, and we never would be. The basic bewilderment is more like, uh, huh? What?
Yeah.
Where am I? Like the
Right.
quality of, how you wake up from a dream and you go like,
Right.
uh, I go back and forth between my apartment and my house. Where am I in my house? Is the bathroom on that side? Where am I? Who am I? I don't even remember. When's the last time I got up? And then our notion of awakening is the clouds clear a little bit. And we have some kind of ordinary clarity about like which way the bathroom is or something like that.
Yeah.
But the basic bewilderment is you just don't even know where you are, who you are, and what you're supposed to be, and that is so close to the original awakened mind. That's an important point to recognize.
Yeah. I didn't mean
That's
to muddy
close.
your
That's closer.
bewilderment.
Okay, muddy my bewilderment. That's a good name for a band, Muddy Bewilderment.
Yeah, no,
That's
I
funny.
remember I would have this recurring thought when I was in Tibet, because I spent a lot of time at um, Garchen Rinpoche's monastery, which was 3 or 4 hours drive away from the nearest civilization. No running water, no electricity, about 13,000 feet up in the mountains. And
13,000 feet. That's high.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
We,
you would get winded just walking, from place to place when I first got there. Um, but every once in a while, I would think, gosh, the world could have ended yesterday, and I wouldn't know it. Like
yeah.
there's
Wow.
no connection to civilization here at all. It would take a few. It's almost like how the light from the sun takes what 7.5 minutes to get to the earth. It's like
Yes.
how long would it take for somebody on a horse to come up and be like, by the way, civilization out there is gone.
Yeah. Wow. And that it was that way for about 700 years mostly.
Yeah, yeah,
That's an amazing part of your life experience there. And as I mentioned the other day, your guru is Garchen Rinpoche, right?
yeah.
So for those of us who are, don't know who that is, there's a film on YouTube. You remember the title, right?
Yeah, for the benefit of sentient beings.
Please, if you want to learn something about the vital point, the essence, the heart of Tibetan
Yeah.
Buddhism, I really can unreservedly recommend you watch that film, because the journey that Garchen Rinpoche went on embodies the level of gradual softening and training, coupled with the real brilliance of kind of some confidence in the awakened potential.
Absolutely.
And that is somebody who you could just, you know, KD, you were there when Krishnadas was there, right?
I wish. No, I was not.
Oh, you
I
weren't there then.
really,
Okay.
yeah, I do. I know. I think they're planning another one, and I would really like to attend that because when I saw the email, I thought I was just delighted. I'm like, wow, this is
Yeah.
really really cool. Krishna Das and Garchen Rinpoche in one room. That's amazing.
They are going back to fall.
Okay, great.
I forget which weekend, but you should go if you can.
Yeah,
And you know, the accessibility of that teacher is very rare. People are not going to get that too often.
yeah,
Where you have that kind of somebody who's not, abiding any kind of pomp and circumstance, but has the genuine bodhicitta like squeezed out, all the juices there. And I just feel like confident saying, even though I've never met him personally, I've met other teachers like that, but that he is unreproachable in terms of representing the Tibetan Buddhist teachings in the most open-hearted and refined way. So you're very lucky. You're very fortunate.
I am very fortunate, and I do really consider myself fortunate to have met him and to be able to consider myself a student in the most humble and least
Yeah,
accomplished way. If I
sure.
can, if 1% of his
Mm,
who he is and his essence and his teachings can rub off on me, then I consider myself fortunate. Because like you're
yeah,
saying, his life is incredible, and there's so much that you can learn from it. For those that may not be familiar, he was imprisoned during the Cultural Revolution when China took over Tibet
yeah,
for 25 years in a Chinese prison. And when you meet him, there's absolutely not one speck that you could tell that this person was imprisoned doing harsh labor for 25 years, because he just radiates pure love and pure
mm,
compassion. And um, there's so many really interesting stories within that, because
mm,
he met his root guru in prison.
right.
And if you watch the movie, he says, until I went to prison, I didn't really understand Dharma.
Mm,
I was
hmm.
studying it, and
Yeah,
I was in a monastery and someone was trying to teach it to me, but I didn't really understand bodhicitta, that, you know,
yeah,
enlightened mind, until I was in prison, until I met my guru. So
yeah,
like just that in itself, like the adversity becoming the path to your
yeah,
enlightenment, is such an incredible lesson in and of itself. But yeah.
And nobody chooses that exactly. That's sort of only a martyr chooses that. Uh,
Mm.
but if it's in your karma to have that kind of, we've been talking about Milarepa in our Wednesday night class at Dharma Moon, and you know, I was just talking to a student this morning and saying, I think maybe people have the wrong idea that somebody's born into this with some kind of magical, uh, evolutionary prospect of being a golden child. But really, the great holders of the lineage that, particularly, I guess, maybe all of the lineages, maybe particularly Kagyu lineage, they all got the crap beat out of them, and
Right.
by life. I don't mean by somebody.
Right.
I mean by life,
Hmm.
to the point where even if they had, like Naropa is a perfect example of like a university professor, even somebody like that who had it made kind of was a Buddhist scholar, and even he had to go out and find this crazy yogi to follow around for 24 years. So I think we can't help but the fact that we come from a culturally and materialistically pampered way. We can't just kind of throw that out the window. You could throw it off and go, I'm going to go an ascetic way, but there's probably a level of masochism in people who do that. So um, it's a tricky thing to navigate. But when you see, I like what you said. You're 1% of that. I think that's a. I don't think that's minimalizing who we are. It's not shrinking us, and it's not reifying them. It's
Mm.
just recognizing. I'd always rather have a teacher who showed that you have plenty of headroom there to go. And
Yeah.
that's, to me, what devotion is. The person is saying, you got headroom there. You can grow. You can keep going.
Mm.
It's not reifying that person. It's like, oh, I could never do that. They say one of the ways to compliment your guru is to surpass them. Did you ever hear
Mm.
that?
Not in that context, but I worked for somebody, and I was in a managerial role, and we were doing a lot of hiring, and they told me, they said, when you're interviewing new hires, one of the questions that you should ask is, can I see myself working for them? And it like hit me like a thunderbolt, because I'm like, well, I've never thought of that before. I've thought, could I
Mm,
see myself working with them? But
mm,
I never considered that this person would surpass me, and
yeah,
I should be considering that. And it really shifted my perspective, um, from that one dimension. So I love that you're bringing it in from
yeah.
sort of the Dharma perspective as well.
Well, and to be clear, not to become proud or pompous or arrogant has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It has to do with genuinely accomplishing and learning and becoming more, uh, adept, and then realizing that there's always going to be another level. So even the great teachers that I have worked with, they're not going like I'm done.
Uh-huh.
There's another horizon. There's another horizon. So you know, I think it would be similar to like thinking, what would it take to become president of the United States? And the people who aspire to that are often very ambitious and driven, but they're also if they don't put some kind of toolbox together, they're not going to get there. Now, you could argue with that. You could say the toolbox could be like manipulation, greed, power, all the rest of those things. And arguably, in the present iteration, it's a good case to make.
Yeah.
So, have to mitigate it with that. We're not talking about ambition and kind of arrogance. If
Yeah.
somehow you can think of accomplishment without thinking of it in those terms, that's really good.
Well, all this whole topic is one reason that I really was really drawn to the Dharma Moon mindfulness meditation teacher training, was the accessibility and the way that you've integrated, being able to, as your book says, making a buck, creativity, spirituality, and making a buck. And I remember a few years ago, uh, my girlfriend, my partner, we were sitting in my living room, and we had just finished meditating, and she said, "You should teach meditation." And I said, "To who?" And really, in that moment, I was thinking of teachers like Garchen Rinpoche or like His Holiness the Dalai Lama that sits there and says, I'm just a simple monk. Or like, Garchen
Mm,
Rinpoche will sit there and, I mean, I've literally sat there and watched him teach for 2 hours on like one stanza of Milarepa
mm,
and go into it
mm,
in such like precise detail where you're just like,
yeah,
I can't believe like that there's that
yeah,
much richness and juice in this one,
right,
couplet, right? But he'll sit there and go, well, I don't really know anything and I'm just an old monk, but somebody
right,
asked me to teach, so I just want to help you guys out, and so
yeah,
those are my examples. And so I'm sitting there going, well, what do I have to offer? Like
yeah,
if the example that I've been given and shown is ultimate humility and like taking the lower seat and not showing off
mm,
or, as the kids would say, stunning in any way, right?
mm,
Then what right do I have to even pick up that mantle? And so I
mm.
really appreciate, teachers like you that are bringing that integration into the modern world and saying like, no, we do have something to offer, we do have something to share, and you have the right to, uh as long as your intentions are good, and to share and to thrive with it.
Well, and that's why we in the Dharma Moon teacher training program we encourage self assessment.
Yeah.
You know, but accurate self assessment would be uh, you don't just denigrate yourself. It's not just
Right.
I'm not worthy. Wayne's World. Uh, it's it's and also knowing what you don't know. That's what some of my teachers say. You don't know what you don't know necessarily. So uh, you know, it's good to have teachers even at any level that can, or at least high level, you know, sangha brothers and sisters who are not there to corroborate your failure or success.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
so the long story short is, you're how do you feel about doing? Are you doing classical Tibetan Buddhist practices? Is that what you do?
A little bit. I would say my main practice is the mindfulness practice that we, teach and practice in
Hmm.
the Dharma Moon program.
Right.
It's
How
been
about, have you
nice
taken
to kind of,
Bodhisattva vow?
yes,
You have. Good.
yeah. I think it's been nice to ground my practice in the way that you teach and the way that Dharma Moon teaches, because um, I I would say before starting the program, it had more of like a open Mahamudra kind of flavor.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, so kind of just it almost was like, let's reset,
mm-hmm,
let's reset and kind of get back to this real beautiful ground,
mm-hmm.
of what.
Precision.
Yeah, that's it.
Mm.
Precision. I love that we bring that in as one of the pillars,
Yeah,
of the training. And I love how you
yeah.
were talking about the gentleness without precision, because so many people in the world that I spend a lot of time in terms of psychedelic integration and breath work, and there is that gentleness without precision. I think the way you put it was kind of mushy, like it's all love and light, and there's a real interesting way that we kind of bypass certain things about being human, within that love and light perspective. And so bringing the precision into it is really key. And I've really appreciated that about, uh, you know, learning more about that in the teacher training.
Unfortunately, they're doing construction in the apartment above me. I don't know if you can you hear that? Maybe
A
not.
little bit, yeah, yeah, it's okay.
Okay, sorry everybody. That's
No,
just the
it's
way
all
it
right.
is. Living
It's
in New
a
York. Well, Who's your audience? Who do you know who the people are out there?
Oh yeah. I mean, this podcast is a mixture of folks that are interested in psychedelic integration, breath work, meditation, um, internal family systems, and somatic type practices. Um, I would say that's been sort of like the top tier of episodes that we've had. We've had a couple of really interesting chats about psilocybin mushrooms, and I've always found it really interesting, like sort of the intersection between psychedelics and Buddhism, because a lot of people that are doing deeper psychedelic work can kind of start to stray into the Dharma shipping lane. Um, and then the different practices that can support actually integrating what you're learning rather than just having an experience, whether that's going on a roller coaster or doing a breathwork journey or having a ayahuasca ceremony, whatever it is. um, it's all, to me, it's about the integration. So hence the vital point of doing the work.
So that topic is coming up regularly lately. Post psychedelic integration. I've heard it from at least 4 or 5 people in the last couple of weeks. I don't know much to add to that conversation. I had an old friend uh, text me. I haven't seen him in 3 or 4 years. A high level professional music guy, and kind of a Dharma guy. And he said, here was the text: just did Toad, really blew the doors off. Let's talk. Toad was all in caps, and for those who don't know, it's Toad Venom. That
Right.
is the sort of probably the most avant-garde of all of them. Would you say that's kind of the furthest out of what's being offered? Or?
Yeah. For me, Buddhism has given me a framework to understand and kind of interpret some of those experiences. I remember I had a pretty transformative experience with it myself, and
With Toad?
and um, when I came out of it and I was trying to integrate and like think about it, you talk in the training program about hearing, contemplating, and meditating. Um, when I was contemplating and trying to figure out how to meditate and integrate what I had just experienced, what came to mind immediately was the description of the bardos in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I've had conversations with several other people that have experience with that same medicine. And they said, yeah, that's exactly what it reminds me of. And from that perspective, to me, it's such a blessing, because here's this sort of practice that we get in the experience of dying. Most of us only get one shot at it, right? This time around. And we're just, on the deathbed, like going through that experience and trying to deal with all the noise and everything that comes along with it as we're going through. And so the having the experience of, oh, I really think this is what dying is going to be like. And being able to go through that and come out the other side, and still keep myself, because I think we both share that philosophical view that we'll be back in a different incarnation after this one. But coming back with all the information that I have, you know, is pretty cool and invaluable, and at least gives me that framework of, oh, here's how I can view these experiences.
Of course, we can't really know,
No,
Um,
absolutely.
and the thing you might conclude is we don't really know what's happening right now either,
Mm,
almost in exactly the same way. That if you try to put your finger on what this is, there's a lot of assumptions that can get easily dismantled by somebody with a fifth grade education about who's doing what to who and what's happening. But it is the convenient and collaborated reality, that so it has a certain amount of momentum to it. That's why if you interrupt that with some kind of, altering brain chemistry substances, you just go, oh God, this is easy to disrupt, you know. But the velocity, the force of holding it together is also easy to maintain because of the habit, the strength of the habit there. So yeah, so suddenly free from fixed mind, that would be one way to. I was just reading a Trungpa Rinpoche thing that said, you have a moment in time. Talk about nowness. It's only about 2/1000ths of a second is actually what now a moment of one single moment of cognition is. That's the duration of it, according to Abhidharma. And then they strand together like pearls, but there are gaps all the way between all of those. And experiencing that gap is a very much part of the practice. At a certain point, you don't really talk about it too much because people will just solidify what that is. But certainly people are experiencing a gap when it's artificially induced, you could say, by the drug experience. And then certainly they can bring part of that back with them as something to integrate. So, the idea that it's calm and peaceful is probably the single most powerful thing to disabuse people of as quickly as is convenient. That it's great to be calm and peaceful, and and if it's indestructible, it's really great. Like somebody like Garchen Rinpoche is indestructibly calm and peaceful. It's Vajra calm and Vajra peace. It's not like he got the right circumstances together to maintain it, which is more like the God realms, right? You just can sustain that for a while. But if your calm and peace could not be destroyed by any form of external circumstance, including illness, death, including planetary catastrophes and so forth, then you really are into a certain level of mind that is not ordinarily accessed by beings in this realm. Even the quote unquote spiritual teachers in this realm are not ready mostly for that level of chaos, to what they construct as even the revised reality, even the new reality, the improved reality, the more enlightened reality, the more awakened reality. It's so disruptive, actually, that only the wrathful deities can really communicate it to most of us, because we're just too comfortable psychologically. So that's why, at some point, these great teachers, either through the amount of love that they put out, is disruptive to our sense of, like, as long as Khyentse Rinpoche said, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, his teacher, used to disrupt him by being so damn nice, so kind, so loving, so benevolent, that he couldn't hold his shit together in the face of that. That's one version. The other version is, really manifesting disruptive energy and cutting into what you expect is going to happen next. It's like this kind of thing.
Some like people might be listening to this and thinking it's that construction above you.
Yeah, and this,
Yeah.
Well, on that note, good work, Jonathan. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
You keep going, and I'll help you any way I can. How about that deal? Let's make a deal.
I appreciate that. I will take that deal. Absolutely. New cohort of the mindfulness meditation teacher trainings coming up, right?
Yeah, which is the program you're taking right now. And so, honestly, to tell you the truth, to have people like you joining us is very enriching for me personally at this stage of the game, that there's so many people coming around who really want to learn and really want to practice. So we start another one on June 23rd. I don't know when this podcast is out. What I'd invite people to come to is an info session that'll be on our dharmamoon.com website, and maybe you can post it too, with Professor Robert Thurman and myself, and a preview, a kind of info session about we'll talk a little bit about teaching in general, and then we'll roll out some details about the program that's coming up. That's January 6th. It's free. You can just log on register for it. If you register, you'll get the recording of it. So even if you can't be there in real time, you can still check it out and come and check it out. That's if you know that you want to jump in before then, just go to the website and register for the program. And the other thing to add is that the introductory level, the June 23rd to 25th, is a standalone program of intro to mindfulness and the path of meditation. So you can just take that course and then roll forward with it if you want to, and we'll roll the tuition forward too. So all those are possibilities. Anybody who has a question about any of that, assist@dharmamoon.com. Just write to assist@dharmamoon.com. We would love to see you. We've had people like Jonathan coming in and out. A lot of our students are out in the world teaching and starting their own companies and things like that. We continue to support them. We're not heavily trying to indoctrinate people in one particular perspective, other than that the mindfulness meditation is a solid ground for your practice wherever you want to take that further. And we've got people doing all kinds of versions and variations on that: sports training, healthcare, yoga, business, etc. So yeah, I would invite people to come along. And another vital point we say is your guess is as good as mine. So we're not trying to like I call it the suppository approach to teaching. We don't do that.
Yeah, and it's been really nice to connect with you through this platform because I'm a great admirer of you and your work, and also your Lama, Trungpa Rinpoche, and it's great to get to connect and talk, get into the weeds of the Buddhism, so to speak. But I also appreciated that the teacher training is open to secular. It's not like you have to be a Buddhist to go into this program. It's open to anyone, and there's lots of different flavors that you get to sample and get a little exposure to, but you don't have to purchase any dish, so to speak.
No,
philosophically,
it's not a suppository, which is what I meant. By that, what I meant by that. But it's oral, and you have to chew it on the way down, otherwise you get indigestion. If you just So there's a lot of indigestion going on right now in the West, and people would feel better if they chewed a little bit better, more thoroughly before they swallowed it. And at the same time, that's not a good excuse for like just poo-pooing the whole thing. And all kinds of mistakes happen along the way for any adventure. But it requires people to show up fully and go like, do we want to continue this or not? It won't continue if people don't want to continue it. It just fades away. And we have a basically non-theistic view. There's no magic to it. It's just based on individually. You pick up the recipe and you cook, and you say, I think I'm going to add some cardamom this time around, and hopefully you have the gravity to know that that's going to taste good and not just mess it up.
Yeah. Well, David, it's been such a pleasure. I welcome you back anytime. And I really, really appreciate you coming and sharing your time, sharing your wisdom and experience.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good to get to know you a little better too this way. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Welcome to this brief mindfulness practice. The nice thing about this practice is that you'll be able to make it as long as you'd like. I'm going to go over the intro, and then you can make it whatever length you'd like. And I'm going to be going over mindfulness as taught through the Dharma Moon program. The mindfulness meditation that we'll be practicing today comes from Buddhism and has been practiced as a core component for over 2,500 years. But I'd like to mention that this practice is completely secular. You don't have to be or identify as a Buddhist at all to practice mindfulness. And you can integrate mindfulness into any religious or spiritual system that you identify with. Really simple. It's just 3 steps. The first step we call taking our seat. And there's a few different ways that we can do that. We're taking care of our physical form. We can sit cross-legged on the floor. We could sit in a chair with a straight back, or we could even kneel on some yoga blocks or a bench. And no one way is better than the other. You can experiment with what feels good to you. If you are sitting on the floor or kneeling, you want to think about having your knees lower than your hips. So with one of those three methods, we're just supporting the bottom half of the body. The top half of the body we want to be strong, but not rigid. Straightening your spine so that your torso, head, and shoulders are upright, but not uptight, and that your shoulders are over your hips. Think of straightening your neck as an extension of the spine, so you can slightly tuck your chin to help with that. I like to picture a string that starts at the bottom of my spine coming out of the top of my head, gently being tugged upwards. Relax your mouth with your lips gently touching or slightly open. And keep your eyes open and relaxed with a soft downward gaze about 4 to 6 feet in front of you. Not really looking at anything, just a soft gaze. Hands are resting, palms down on your thighs, wherever they feel comfortable. Overall, think of creating a relaxed and dignified posture. Not too tight, not too loose. And to accomplish this, we can remember to be upright, but not uptight, and having a strong back and a soft front. So take a second to take your seat and notice how it starts to change your experience. Remember, you can adjust during the practice if you start to feel uncomfortable. So that's the first step, taking your seat. The second step is to connect with the felt experience of our breath. Just find your breath and gently place your awareness there. We want a light touch. So just take a moment to find your breath. I like to ask myself, how do I know that I'm breathing? And just find that place. So that might be underneath your nostrils, feeling the air coming in and out. Might be the rise and fall of your belly or your chest. Could be the full body experience of breathing. The third step is to notice when your mind wanders, to label your thoughts as thinking, and place your attention back on your breath. So we repeat this third step over and over, and each time we do, we're building that strength and stability. So those are the three steps. We take our seat, connect to the breath, and then whenever we've noticed that the mind has wandered, we label it as thinking and bring our awareness back to the breath. You can go ahead and pause and practice for as long as you'd like. I recommend 20 minutes, at least 5 times a week. But if you're new to the practice, maybe start with 10. The important part is the consistency. Each time we connect to the breath and reconnect to the breath, we're building that strength with precision and gentleness. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, enjoyed this practice. And that's really the vital point, is to practice. As David is fond of saying, words don't cook rice. So keep cooking, my friends, keep practicing, and I'll see you again on The Vital Point. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, I'd love it if you leave a review. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Magic Alchemy if you'd like to learn more about transformation, integration, and how to connect through coaching, breathwork, and meditation. Remember that regardless of the methods you're practicing, the vital point is to practice.